Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Gabby and welcome. If you've never been here before, have no idea what I do here on my channel, I cover true crime cases, and all the cases that I cover on my channel are a little bit older. They're basically like 20 years or older. So if that's something that you might be interested in, maybe go down below, click that subscribe button, and also make sure to turn on the post notifications to be notified every time that I upload. But if you are not new to my channel, you're probably well aware or have noticed, or maybe you just don't care, but I have been gone from my channel for over a month, which is insane to me. But I basically took February as like mental health month. I just kind of needed a break, needed to step back. I feel like all YouTubers kind of do that at some point, but yeah, that's basically what I did. But I'm back now. Not only am I back on my channel, but I also have a new background. I redid my background and I really like it. I don't know, tell me what you think. My last backdrop I had was like really dark. It was supposed to be black, but on camera it came up like a navy blue, and it just clashed with my hair, and everybody pointed it out pretty much in the comments. And I know that's not the point of this video, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna redo the background, and I'm thinking about putting like shelves. I don't know. I needed something different. And I know I'm really like talking with my hands right now, which annoys everybody so much. None of this has anything to do with the video, but I feel like I have so much to say because I've been gone for a month. But anyways, the case that I have for you all today, it's an older one. It was not the easiest to research because it was just one of those cases that every source that I looked at had kind of like differing information, and I really had to like try to figure it out. But it's a very interesting case. It's very heartbreaking. It's another child case, which these are obviously very hard to talk about, but I kind of have to like mentally step away from it myself and talk about them because they deserve their time as well. But with all of that being said, let's get right into the case. Before I dive into the case, I do have to say that a portion of my information has come directly from write-ups done by a journalist named Karen McCohen, who worked for the Register Guard, and she also worked firsthand with people directly involved in this case. I also went directly off of newspaper articles published during the initial investigation. I will have all of those sources in the description of this video if you want to check those out after you're done watching this. This is the unsolved murder of Alice Louise Lee. Alice Louise Lee was born to parents Ernest Earl Lee and Lucille Mary Hamilton Lee in Eugene, which is in Lane County, Oregon, and she was born on June 3rd of the year 1953. The date that we are talking about was August 29th of the year 1960. The location was a bean farm located in Lane County, but the exact location is a little hard to pinpoint. Some sources say it was located in Eugene, some say Pleasant Hill, and some say Trent. If I had to put my money on where it was, I would say Trent, just due to some of the newspaper articles that came out right when it happened. Pretty much all of the earliest newspaper articles stated that the farm was in Trent. Now, this bean farm, it was owned by the Swan family, and the Swan family, they were really known in their area. They would hire local families and youth from this area of Lane County to pick green beans on the farm. Picking green beans at this specific bean farm was something that the Lee family had been doing for years, since before Alice was even born, and Alice had spent a lot of her life with her family on this farm. The Lee family was there often, and Alice, although she was young, she knew her way around the farm very well. Also, the farm was only about 1.5 miles away from the Lee home. It was very close, so getting there on the regular was not hard for them. On this day, Alice was wearing an aqua, rose, and white striped blouse, a brown and gold corduroy jacket, and blue tennis shoes. Alice was only 7 years old at the time, so she wasn't really doing any of the picking of the beans herself, but her mother and older siblings were. She was mostly playing in the field with her doll. Now, some sources say it was like one doll, and then some say she was playing with like a bunch of dolls. Doesn't really make much of a difference, but she was playing with some toys. Now, this family would usually get there really early in the morning, and that's what they did on this day. They had been there for a little while, and at around 9 to 9:30 a.m., Alice tells her mother that she's going to go put her doll or dolls next to where their lunch boxes were located. Her last words to her mother were, "I'm going to put my doll and things with the lunchbox." That's apparently what the last words were that she ever told her mother. From my research, all of the workers put their lunch boxes in the same location, which was right near the dirt road next to the field where the bean crops were. I personally could not find out exactly how far the distance was between where Alice's family was on their rows in the field picking beans and where the lunch boxes were located, but wherever she was heading was out of their view. It was a pretty big farm and the rows were quite long, and there were over 100 people out that day on the farm. I can't speak for Alice's mother, but I'm guessing that's why she didn't go with Alice to the lunchbox area. She figured it wasn't far and there were plenty of eyes on the farm that would look out for her child. But unfortunately, like we know all too well on my channel and in general, tragedy can strike very quickly and a child can be gone in an instant, and that is what happened to Alice. Now at around 10 a.m., it is said that Alice's older sister, Marjorie, had seen Alice in the row that she had been working on. A little time goes by. It's about 11 a.m. at this point, and two women having lunch near the dirt road where the lunch boxes were, they hear a loud scream, but they don't think anything of it. None of them thought to go check it out. The reasoning for that was because they figured it was just some of the teenagers, you know, on the field, some of the teenage workers just horsing around with each other. A bit more time goes by and everybody starts wondering where Alice is. She hasn't come back to the area where her family was, and after further looking for her and speaking to other workers on the field, no one had seen or heard from her in quite some time. The first place they really go to look was near the lunch boxes, because that was obviously where she was headed when she left her family, and they ended up finding her doll and doll clothing right near the lunch boxes where she went to go put them earlier. Almost immediately after realizing something was horribly wrong, a huge search for the missing girl ensued. According to an article published by the Register Guard the day after Alice went missing, there were about 100 farm workers, locals to the area, neighbors, and officers all helping in the search. They were going through that farm with a fine-toothed comb, looking through every row of the beans, looking in the bushes, and also in a nearby cornfield. There were also some ponds and lakes. Everyone looked in these. No one could find anything else connected to the little girl besides that doll or dolls and the doll clothing. As more days passed, they would search in helicopters so they could get an aerial view of the farm. Then bloodhounds were brought in, and when the bloodhounds were brought in, according to the Register Guard, they tracked Alice's scent to a couple different locations. The first was that they tracked her scent to a men's outhouse that was located not far from the bean fields, which is extremely suspicious that a little girl goes missing and her scent is then tracked to an outhouse made for the men workers on the farm. The scent, though, couldn't be tracked any farther than the outhouse. The second location where her scent was said to be tracked was to Trent Elementary School, which this information was put in the newspaper years later and came directly from police reports. After tracking her scent to the elementary school, they looked over that area from an aerial view and also dragged the nearby Willamette River. They found nothing. Based on one newspaper article I came across, for a time, authorities believed that possibly Alice was taken through the woods to Trent Elementary School, which was about a half-mile away from the farm, and then that she was put in a car and somebody drove off with her. This was just kind of one of the initial theories. Now, I'm not entirely sure what elementary school Alice went to herself. I couldn't find that information online. If it was Trent, then that may obviously explain why her scent was tracked there. I don't think tracking her scent to the nearby elementary school was too much of a surprise to them, but they did check it out. Neither of these locations, though, brought forward any new findings in their search. Sheriff Ed Elder would be quoted saying, "The obvious possibility is that she's either left here by herself on foot to go home and got lost, or somebody took her in a car. Another possibility is that she could have been hit by a car on one of the Beanyard roads and disposed of elsewhere. She could have fallen into the river. She could be in any of these bushy areas here." Alice's mother and family definitely leaned more towards a person being responsible for Alice's disappearance than her just walking home and something happening or some sort of an accident. At this time, there were many theories and rumors floating around the area as to where Alice may be or what happened to her, and as more days passed by, people were beginning to expect that she was not alive anymore. At this point, they were more so trying to find her body, and they eventually would 18 days after she went missing. The owners of the Swan farm were R.I. Swan and Luana Swan. Both of them were extremely helpful to authorities in the search for Alice and let them do whatever they needed to do on their land to hopefully locate her, which is awesome, and that's how it should be. R.I. Swan ends up reaching out to Lane County Deputy Sheriff Wayne Dillon, who was put on Alice's case, and he tells him that on their property, they've been smelling a horrible odor. There's a strong smell traveling around the property, and it smells like death, which I'm sure you all know where I'm going with this. He also tells him that there are buzzards circling around a specific area on the property as well. This, of course, doesn't sound too good. They were hoping it was maybe just an animal dead in that location or something, but it wasn't. As soon as the men get to the area where the buzzards were flying around, they found Alice's lifeless body. On September 16th of 1960, they finally located the missing girl that they had been searching for over 2 weeks. Alice was found nude, face down in a shallow grave that had been hand dug. Her little corduroy jacket was tied very tightly around her neck. This strangulation is what ended her life. The rest of her clothes were found piled right next to her. They could not tell at the time with their technology if she had been sexually assaulted or not, but it is believed that she had been and that was the motive. Luana Swan said that as soon as she saw the two men's faces when they started heading back to their home, that she knew instantly that they had found Alice. You're probably wondering how they did not locate her body before if they looked all around this property. Based on a newspaper article I came across, it was said they looked in that area during their first search, but when they decided to do another search, including that location, that area was ironically not researched, and Chief Criminal Deputy Harry Marlowe admitted it was a mistake that they did not research that area. It is believed, still to this day, that the person responsible did take Alice near or to the men's outhouse. That's why they tracked her scent there. If they actually had searched the area where her remains were found and she wasn't there the first time, kind of makes you think, did the killer take her remains somewhere else? The search was done, and then the killer placed her remains where they would eventually be found. To me, just a researcher, just a YouTuber, that doesn't make much sense, because why would a killer take her body elsewhere and then bring her body back to the main place that everybody was searching, which was the bean farm? If they already have her body off the property, why would they bring it back? If you ask me, I don't think they ever searched that exact location where her body was found, that they just thought they did. This is just a personal opinion. I obviously was not there, but it's just, it doesn't make much sense. I think it was just a very big area of land. There were a lot of people out searching, and I think there was a little bit of confusion going on, and that they thought that they did search that location and they did not. Like I said, just a personal opinion. I do have to say though, before we get into the investigation of this case was insanely mishandled, and it is mostly because of how old it was and because it occurred in an area where they were not used to seeing many homicides. Not only was it before law enforcement really learned in general how to handle homicides, but it was also in an area where not many took place. This was a time far before DNA testing, so they did not think in their minds to keep a lot of the evidence. They also did not take care of the actual crime scene the way that we would in today's time. At the very beginning of this case, though, there was one suspect, and this was a man who used to live in the area, and he had allegedly threatened Alice's mother and a few other people who lived in that area because they once all testified against him in court. I'm not sure for what though, but they did, and apparently it was said that he had been out for revenge against certain people in the community. People thought, after finding Alice's body and realizing someone was responsible, that maybe this man did it. Sheriff Ed Elder ended up locating the man in the state of California, questioning him and giving him a polygraph test. Based on the man's alibi and passing of the test, he was cleared of any involvement. And based on my research, I really couldn't find his name anywhere online, but I guess it's not of importance because he was cleared, but this was just an unnamed man in this case that they thought was responsible at the very beginning. Well, on to the next part of this case. Even though her murder occurred during a time when technology was not even a fraction of where it is in today's time, there were two men put on the case who tried their hardest. Oregon Governor Mark Hatfield ordered the Oregon State Police to take over the case. Before the Oregon State Police were in charge of it, it was just being handled by the local Lane County Department. Since it was a murder of a child, a little girl, and sexual assault was most likely involved, the governor wanted the state police to take it over, and Oregon State Police Detective Cleve Vetetto and Oregon State Police Trooper Al Wolf were the men who were put on the job. They are two very important men in this case, for sure. The two men, they were both in their 30s and they had children of their own, and they became extremely devoted to solving Alice's murder. They also made it clear that the local department that handled the case before them definitely mishandled it. One of the first things Vetetto and Wolf did was they decided to figure out exactly who was there on the farm the day that Alice was abducted and murdered. And this was actually a little easier than they expected because the Swans had name cards on posts at the end of every row of beans. So they collected all these name cards that were up that day and started jotting everyone's name down, and then it was time to start questioning those people. Due to them believing that Alice had been raped, they obviously questioned the men and boys a lot harder than they did the women and girls that were there that day. This questioning of all the people there the day of the abduction and murder was something that the two men wished the Lane County Police Department had just done sooner, before they even located Alice's body. They never understood why the local authorities didn't start questioning people intensely who were actually there that day, but they figured it was really because at the beginning of the case, before finding her body, some law enforcement was really leaning towards the theory that she had basically just fallen somewhere or drowned in a local body of water. At the very beginning, a lot of people didn't think that she was abducted by somebody. Sheriff Elder thought maybe someone took her, but without a body yet, they were not really set on that theory. You might be thinking though, well, what if it wasn't a worker? What if it was just someone who came onto the property? Well, the Swans really only hired local people. They never hired anyone who was just coming through the town looking for work. They only hired people who had lived in the area for a while or people they knew rather well. Even though there were around 100 people there that day, the Swans could pretty much put a face to any of those names. If anyone there saw someone who wasn't a local, they would have probably said something and pointed it out to the Swans that, someone was on the property who was not supposed to be. Everyone pretty much knew each other really well who was there that day. Also, the farm itself was on a very back road, a private property, not just an area you randomly stumble upon. You couldn't even see the farm from where the people parked their vehicles in the parking lot. Viteto and Wolf at the beginning, they just did not believe it was someone random who came on the property. They believed it was a local who was hired to work the farm picking beans that day. There was some talk that a stranger was on the property that day spotted, but apparently this was said to be just a rumor, that there wasn't any legitimacy to this, and that the person or people who said that they spotted somebody unknown on the property, they couldn't really give a description to that person at all. There was also supposedly a teenage driver who was seen speeding his vehicle away from the Swans' property after Alice went missing, but this teenager would be found out and questioned and cleared of any involvement in the case. Viteto and Wolf, they also started looking into reports of sexual assault in the area. Most of these sexual assault reports had to do with children who had been sexually assaulted by family members of theirs, which of course is disgusting and absolutely heartbreaking, but this didn't really lead them anywhere in the case. But them looking into these sexual assault cases would end up opening a ton of more cases for them to look at in the future and hopefully have some justice for, but none of these had any connection to Alice's case. This was one of those cases that for decades would have ups and downs. There would be times when authorities thought that they were close to solving it, and then they would eventually hit a dead end. Hundreds and hundreds of leads would be followed. Many polygraph tests given, so many people questioned, but in the end, not everything needed to come together to solve it would come together. It was also one of those cases that seriously affected the community. We've heard of a lot of these cases like this before, where people became a lot more protective of their children and people were making sure to lock their doors at night and close their windows, and kids were not playing outside without supervision. We've heard this so many times, and this usually happens with cases that have to do with children. It definitely changed that area for sure. Lane County, really, it wasn't the same after Alice Lee's murder. Now, there were two main articles done by Karen McCohen that I went off of, and one was written in 2010 and one was written in 2015. Cleve Viteto would end up passing away on August 5th of 2010, and when Al Wolf went to see him before he passed, Viteto literally said, "What about Alice Lee?" And Wolf said that he would take care of it. It is these two men's dying wishes to solve this case, and Wolf is still doing everything he can in today's time, working with Karen McCohen to try to find out who did this to Alice Lee all those years ago. Karen herself was actually born the same year as Alice, grew up in that same area, remembers hearing of the case when it happened, and even had a similar upbringing as Alice, so she herself feels a very strong bond to the case. Well, in the year 2010, Wolf was more leaning towards a young man working on the farm that day being the one responsible. He didn't know who it could have been, but he was leaning towards that theory, that it was someone sexually predatory and they saw an opportunity, saw the little girl by herself, and that they took it. That was really what he was thinking at the time around 2010, and probably for years before and a little bit of time after. A woman named Janice Monette, who was there that day Alice was abducted and murdered, stated that she believed this theory as well, and that she also believed it was possibly someone who did not have a car, because if they had a car, then they most likely would have taken the girl's body much farther away to dispose of it, which that does make sense. In the 2015 write-up though, this is where things kind of change. It seems that Wolf's opinions start going down a different route, which of course can happen over time. He started diving into a theory that it wasn't a younger man who was responsible for the murder, that it was actually an older man in 1960 who lived near the farm and was a very long time resident of the area. In 2015, Karen McCohen writes, "I traveled out of state with Wolf in 2011 to interview a witness with compelling information suggesting that this man, now long dead, admitted killing the child to at least one other person in the community. This source also told us that police were never notified in exchange for the alleged confessed killer leaving the area. Wolf believes at least one relative of the man who allegedly killed Alice also learned of his role in the crime. He believes this relative is the person whose conscience prompted him to go to the Eugene Police Department in the late 1980s to report that he'd previously overheard a conversation between his father and grandfather in which the older man acknowledged killing Alice Lee. The grandson, who looked to be in his 20s when he came to the police, was weeping and distraught as he sought to unburden himself, according to a former EPD dispatcher quoted by columnist Don Bishop in a 1992 column. Lane referred him to a Eugene detective who turned out to be unfamiliar with the case, and no report was ever made of the encounter. After I retired from journalism in 2012 and became a licensed private investigator myself, I agreed to continue working with Wolf on the Alice Lee murder. Based on our interview with the out-of-state witness, we believe at least one descendant of the alleged confessed killer could still come forward with direct information that could solve the case. We believe this person has tried to do so at least once, possibly twice in the past. We hope they will do so one more time and provide long overdue justice for Alice, for her surviving family, and for a community still tormented by the violent death of an innocent child. So, based on that information, they believe that if this man did in fact kill Alice Lee, that he could have a family member out there somewhere who may be withholding some information that may help actually solve this case. That they were withholding it, but that they went to police before and that police never did anything about it. The thing though, just as a researcher, that is so tricky is that because this case was so mishandled at the beginning, they really don't have any DNA evidence. So officially solving this case would be so tremendously difficult, especially if the actual killer is deceased. This is one of those decades-old cases that could have been solved using possibly genetic genealogy, but that can't be done without DNA. You never know though, because crazier things have happened, so we don't know. Al Wolf actually reaches out every single year to the Register Guard on the anniversary of the case, and he always hopes for some sort of write-up done in the newspaper to help reignite it a little so that maybe more information will come forward. I know that I don't have the biggest channel on YouTube, but anything helps, even if it's just keeping our memory alive in some way and showing that people still care. But Al Wolf, he's still out there and he's still trying. According to the bulletin, retired assistant OSP Superintendent Dennis O'Donnell, who came up under Viteto and later supervised him, knows how much this unsolved case haunted him. Viteto was a legend, a real bulldog, O'Donnell said. He was the epitome of what good, hard-digging police officers were back in that era. I think this is the only unsolved homicide where he was the principal investigator. I knew how hard he and Al Wolf worked that homicide all these years, so I got him reassigned to this district the last year of his career. The duo worked that case and worked it, even in retirement, O'Donnell said. But it happened so long ago. He said, memories fade, people move on, people die. I think that last quote, it describes it perfectly, and it describes a lot of older cases perfectly. I think there is hope for any case, but the longer that time goes on, the harder it gets to solve a case. Before I end this video though, because I know if I do not mention it, people are going to look into this case and bring it up in the comments, but there was a book released a couple years ago titled The Handy Candy Man, Solving the 1960 Cold Case of Alice L. Lee, and it was written by Cheryl S. Justice and Delilah G. Michael, and the book's entire point is that a man named Claude L. Glaspie killed Alice. It is described as a historical, biographical, true crime book based on facts, but nothing in the book has apparently been taken seriously by authorities enough to actually look into. I have not read the book myself, and even if I have, I can't sit here and say that anything in it is 100% fact because it has not been legally proven so. So there is that, but I felt the need to mention the book either way. But you have to think there are hundreds of cases where people have released books to back up their own theories after looking into certain, you know, articles, information, police reports, everything like that. I mean, look at Jack the Ripper. There's so many books out there about who Jack the Ripper could have been. You never know. They could be 100% right on their theory. I don't know. It's just, it has never been proven legally. I just hope that eventually something can be done to solve this case. This case is 61 years old. Older cases than this one have been solved, but those pretty much all have involved DNA. And this case has no DNA on file. There's no DNA. It is just really unfortunate is all, but fingers crossed for this little girl who deserved to live a full life, and some monster of a human took that from her. This is still open, and anyone with information on who may have committed this crime is invited to contact Oregon State Police Detective Sergeant Steve Payne at 503-934-0163 or email him at kmacinvestigations@gmail.com. So that was the case of Alice Louise Lee, and do you see why I have to take a break from YouTube at times? Because these cases are really hard to talk about. A case having to do with a child, it hits different. And I know there are a lot of YouTubers and people who do podcasts who specifically do not cover cases about children, and I completely respect that because it is hard. It's very difficult to talk about. And especially a case like this that is just so frustrating because you know that the person responsible, they're probably not alive anymore and they got away with it. Cases like this, it just shows that this world is a scary place and anything can happen, even with over 100 people in that direct area at the time to see if something happens, and still it can go unsolved. Leave any thoughts or theories that you have about this case down below in the comments of this video. And if you have any cases that you want to suggest here on my channel for me to cover, you can email me at gabulosiscaserequests@gmail.com. And I hope that everybody is having a good day, everybody is doing okay, everybody is staying safe, and I will see you all in the next one.